Hi everyone. This is iBookBinding's live stream, and hi. And today we are doing something special because we decided to invite a guest to our live stream for the first time ever, and that's Rita Udina, a book conservator and bookbinder from Barcelona, from Spain. Hi, Rita.
Hi, Stefan. Really nice to be here with you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm also glad to hear you and to see you here. And please tell us if everything is fine with the sound. And Pavel, as usual, joins us from Moscow. Hi, Pavel.
Hi, it's been a while.
Yeah,
Glad to see you both.
it's been a while, definitely. I think everything should be fine with the sound. But just if anyone can comment if you hear all of us, that would be nice because it has been some time before since our last live stream, and I've lost touch just a bit. So there was a bit of delay, a bit of a pause in our live streams, and if you want to know the reasons, you can watch uh, the second from the last live stream we made a couple of months ago already, and we'll talk about it more in the future. But today we decided to talk about limb bindings and about their representation in visual arts, in paintings, and maybe if Pavel, are there any comments already or not? Anyone, please tell us if there is sound and everything is fine. Especially from Pavel and from Rita.
Uh, should I share the image?
Yes, if you share the image, we'll start talking, I guess.
Yeah. Here it is.
Yeah. So that's how the discussion started some time ago, several weeks ago. I decided to share some quite old images that Anna Markova posted on her Instagram ages ago, and okay, Stepan joined the YouTube live stream, and he says sound is all right, perfect.
Hi, Colin.
And now we know that Kalin joins us. And Anna Markova is a person who has an amazing Instagram dedicated to book history and knows a lot about book history. And he shared this image, this painting painted by Hans Holbein, the portrait of merchant. I don't remember the name, unfortunately.
Georg Giza.
Georg Giza, okay. And at the same time, she also shared a couple of images of a book she found in an archive she was working with, and supposedly that was a Spanish binding, Spanish limb binding, and it definitely looks pretty similar to what you can see in the painting. And the connection with Spain also was something that sort of made us to call Rita and to ask her to join this talk today. So that's how it all started. And then I was very glad that there was a quite intense discussion on Facebook and on Instagram of these images and these type of bindings, and there were some things that I definitely didn't know about limb bindings that I found out during these discussions. For one, for example, it appears that there are some regional differences in these types of bindings, and for example, in some countries of the southern Europe, in Italy, in Spain, sometimes these limb bindings were made with hardcovers. So structurally, they were pretty the same. The signatures were sewn through the spine, through the leather or vellum, and but then hardcovers were attached, I guess, for more protection. Still, some other elements were also in place as for so sometimes they were in place. Sometimes there were flaps for more protection, And also another thing that was mentioned on Instagram, I was recommended to check the keywords Relure Lyonnaise, so Lyon binding, and maybe Pavel can share some here. So here is a pretty similar structure as something you can see in the Holbein's painting. There is the flap. There is stitching through the spine. There are even these parts that go over the covers. And yeah, I guess I will share the link to some information on these Lyon bindings. But anyway, it was an amazing discussion, and we thought that we will talk more about it today. And what else? I wanted to say something else. Pavel, what did I want to say?
It will get back to you.
Okay. So let's start. Rita, what's your experience with the Spanish part of this style of bindings? Because
Should I stop sharing the images?
yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, well, when Stefan invited me, I wanted to make clear that I'm not an expert on this type of bindings, but I have restored many of them, and yeah, I'm happy to share what my point of view as a restorer of this type of bindings, and I really enjoy restoring them because it's a really smart binding, very, very, very simple, and at the same time super efficient. And it's also very rewarding to restore because of that. The materials are really good, enduring, and yeah, I mean it's a really nice type of binding and a really strong structure. And I have seen many types from different places and dates in Spain mostly. And yeah, if you want, I can share the images of some of the restorations I have made and comment a bit. Okay, so I will share. Share. Okay, so I think this is the oldest book I have ever restored. It's from the 13th century. And well, this is after conservation. It was that was before. It was very much damaged.
That's an important note.
Yeah, and one of the features of this type of bindings is the saving of material. And for instance, here you can see that the flap is at the same time this part of the animal, I don't know, the neck. You see this?
Oh, okay. So it's just a natural part of the piece of leather.
Exactly.
Because
exactly.
When you have
so it wasn't cut that way. It is that way.
Yeah, I mean the piece of leather was roughly this shape, and they took advantage of this protruding part to make it the flap. And in this type of bindings, there is so many examples of saving material in so many ways, and this is one of them. No, so shaping the binding according to the leather rather than the other way, as we do nowadays. And well, this one has a flap. The really old ones, such as this or this other one, well, I cannot say if this is a flap or not. I mean, it's just there, a piece of parchment. But in the really old ones, it's super simple. It's just the vellum folded and sewn. there are not even turnings, no, just one piece. And later on, and regarding the saving, it is really not uncommon to see documents used as bindings, no, such as in this case. So this is a much later binding. It's from 16th century, and this already has turning. No, it's not only folded. It has this turn so that this part is much more endurant. But you see the way the turnings are sewn, it's very like just some random stitches. And yeah, what I like of these bindings is that some of them are very delicate, and some of them are very casual. You can see that people used to do them sort of regularly, no? Because this is not an amazing tacket, no?
Yeah. Well, that's the beauty of this type of bindings. They are absolutely functional. And once again, when we had this discussion on Facebook and Instagram, people mentioned that, and also we discussed it with Pavel when we planned this subject for today's live stream, that oftentimes they were either ledgers, so some books with financial documentation or history of transactions or something, or sometimes there were archives of some letters or something. And if somebody will go back to the image of this Holbein's painting, you can see that there is some piece of paper looking out from the book block, and that's the first thing. And then in his hands he has a letter. So maybe he was working with this book or this ledger, or maybe he was preparing to insert a letter in this book. And another thing I wanted to mention about this letter in his hand is that our guess was that it was letter locked. So it connects to another subject that is pretty interesting.
Another thing I wanted to ask you, Rita, when I was researching this painting, I found this quote, that this type of binding allows the ledger to open flat.
Yes.
Which is also an indicator of a working book, a book as a tool, because if you need to read it, not just to store it, it needs to open flat. And I don't quite,
especially if you need to write in it.
It's
and
I don't quite
understand not in a book that's not flat.
And I don't quite understand, is it particular to limb bindings that they open flat particularly well? How does it work?
Well, yeah, it depends on how thick they are. I mean, if it's sewn onto the parchment, no, such as this, that's the spine.
Yeah.
The parchment is super flexible, so yeah, you can just open and it remains completely flat. I don't know. Here's, bueno, this is a cover, no, and well, this is just a folio and the cover. I don't have yeah, you can open. And what he mentioned about, so here you find other documents that were added later on. You see that the diversity of formats, I mean, it was something very, a working tool, no? So that you can just insert folios, different shapes, but because it's really flexible. So you can, no problem. Then when they add the boards, it's not that flexible. It becomes not as it becomes not as easy, and it's stiffer. Exactly.
I also wanted to make another interruption, and once again we had a break for some time, and absolutely I forgot how we usually do these live streams. If you will leave a comment saying from where you join us, it will make us very happy. It's always a pleasure to see from which regions, from which countries and cities people come from. That's the first one. And then if you have any questions about current topic, about some other topics related to bookbinding or book history as well, you can post them and we will try to answer them either today or maybe during our next live streams or podcasts. So feel free to join the conversation. It's always much more interesting to have live conversation with the audience. And of course, please check Rita Odino on Facebook. She has an amazing website and a lot of useful information there. And in a moment, I will post a link in the comments so that you can use it. And support us on Patreon. There is a link in the description. That's very important because we spend this money on editing of our podcast. We haven't been posting anything as of lately, but we're planning to continue. So after this interruption, let's return to the books. If you have anything else to show to us, that would be just amazing. And in your experience, how often are these limb bindings? Do they have hard covers, and how often do they have soft covers? How does it work?
What I see is that the older they are, the less likely it is that they have covers. I mean, in older bindings, you never find, you rarely find hardcovers, except from the types of binding, sort of Hebrew. My pronunciation is really bad. So really old ones that are type of Islamic bindings, then they do have a core inside. But other than Islamic bindings, they lack any core. And only after the 15th, I would say, no, 16th century, you find the core. So, and what I was speaking about reusing material, you also find really nice examples of reused manuscripts. And it's just beautiful because this, I mean, they made on purpose to, for us to admire this, because this, the binding is just this, and the images are upside down, but it's clear that they like it anyway as it is, no? And yeah, something that, for instance, when they add the turn-ins and the flap, for instance, this really nice decoration, as opposite to the previous one that was just some thread, it's not just decoration. Every part of the book has a purpose. And for this, these laces with the shape of a star, the goal is to keep together the turn-ins of the flap. If the flap is is square, you don't need such a big area to be reinforced. So what I really enjoy of these bindings is that the beautiful parts are always, they always have a goal. And for instance, this...
absolutely functional and then beautiful at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for instance, these leather tackets, because the sewing goes through the binding, and I have this example. If the sewing is the stitches are very close to each other, it is possible that this breaks. So the reason for this type of reinforcement, the leather
for the straps,
is to make sure that these holes don't become a big tear in the spine, and that's the way it was held into the cover. But again, everything is so perfect, no? Because nothing is extra. Everything has a goal in here.
Yeah.
And see, no, they are really nice. And
So,
for instance,
I will interrupt you from time to time. I hope
yeah.
that's okay. We have a couple of comments, and I will just read them, and we'll return back to. Victoria Caruthers. I'm not sure about the where to put the emphasis, but hi from Massachusetts, USA. So happy you are back, and we're also very happy. And thank you for being with us, Victoria. And also on YouTube, iBookBindings. Hi, I'm Macrino from South Africa. I really appreciate your videos. I think this person joined our live streams before. So once again, nice to have you here and everybody else. And once again, if you have any questions, please post them and we will try to answer them. And maybe Rita will also have something that's to say about these questions.
I have a question. I noticed that they have a variety of ways to close them, to keep them closed.
Because exactly.
I'd imagine that books like that contained sensitive information, so there would be some clasps or something, but no, they're just enough to hold them closed, but in very different ways.
Yes, what I think is that the closing is not that much a matter of locking in any way the contents, but rather a way to keep the parchment in shape. Mm-hmm. Because as you know, the parchment distorts if you do nothing. So the reason to have locks is to have this bit of attention when you're not using it so that it doesn't distort that much. So again, everything is so like, yeah, it's perfect.
This reminds me a bit. When in the previous life when I had my classes, bookbinding classes, when I was teaching bookbinding, I had this class that I repeated a couple of times, which I called Traveler's Journal or something like that. I didn't know anything about Limp bindings, about anything about Islamic bindings, and that's a reference we also need to discuss, I guess, during this live stream. But I sort of thought that there should be a structure where you take a long piece of leather and start stitching signatures to it, and then you can do it like indefinitely, well, until the leather ends. And that was quite a nice class, and students were quite happy, and we were also experimenting with all different types of things and different formats of sheets and signatures you can insert inside, and making different pockets or something like that from paper. So I guess if anyone wants to experiment, that's a great field for experimentation, and absolutely indefinite. You can do anything with this format.
And what about those pages with holes in them? What are those?
Bueno, yes, this I wanted to share because of this is only the binding after being detached, and it's a reused document with a big hole, that's it. And that's the book. So this was very interesting because the book was quite big, so they did not have a parchment big enough to cover the book. So what they did, they added with a really nice sewing another piece of parchment that is lost here. Okay. But I can show you that's the only remnant of the part that should have been below. And it was sewn all along. I mean, it's such a nice work, and it tells us to which extent parchment was valued, because it's such an effort to do this all embroidery, you know, because it's 3 parts of parchment, the big one, this one, and the other one. So because it is a document, I reproduced, so that's the binding before conservation, and I was asked to remove the binding and to keep it as a document. So this is the reproduction. So it was 3 pieces of parchment, all sewn together. No, and well, it's a nice example.
So you also had to do all this teaching.
Yeah, absolutely. And
you know exactly
all
what
the folios.
Yeah.
Sí.
Amazing.
And for instance, I will look now for here. So it's interesting that we haven't mentioned that the fact of having boards or not makes a big difference in the type of sewing, because when there is no boards, they are sewn onto the binding. But if there are boards, then the text block already has its own sewing on thongs, it's sewn on thongs, on cords, whatever, and it's very different. For instance, this one, you see, has these two parts, so you don't see the sewing on the spine because it's not sewn there, but you see the cores of the end bands, and that's what holds the book on the binding. And this other example is the same, but furthermore, the thongs go through the binding, and this is after conservation. So this is the same book, and this one has the boards. But you see now, instead of having the sewing through the spine, the sewing is independent. And this is why you cannot open this as flat as the others. It's not as flexible because they don't move along. No, the text block goes up, whereas the spine goes down, making a hollow. So it's a big difference. They are not that much the same. No?
This is basically a different structure.
Absolutely. I mean, it has similarities because it's a binding. I mean, it's a parchment, but not so many. And another thing.
And that's sorry. I'll interrupt you once again. And that's something that also was discussed in this original discussion on Instagram and Facebook. That there are some differences in what is called limb binding in different regions in different countries. So more in the south, as I already mentioned, it can be a soft binding, or it can be soft cover, or it can be binding with hard boards. But in some countries, for example, like in the Netherlands, so we had Astrid Beckers in the comment section, and she told that it's never called a limb binding if it has hard covers. So only soft cover bindings of this sort are called limb bindings. And
as far as I know, in English, a limb binding, you would never include the ones that have the boards. So it would be wrong, I think.
And then there was Monica Langwe, who is also a great bookbinder and expert on book history, and she also wrote about this sort of bindings. You can Google her, and she has publications, books dedicated to limb bindings, and she told us more about these Italian and Spanish versions with hard covers. So yeah, it's always interesting how it changes from country to country, from tradition to tradition. And also when we were preparing for this talk, you told about how this style of binding is called in Spanish language. So
yes, we call these bindings literally flexible bindings, encuadernación flexible.
Yeah.
And when they have a board, we call it semi-flexible. So yeah, but because I think it's sort of clear that there is an evolution. So you depart from a parchment, then the parchment is folded more and more, then you add a cover inside. So yeah, at some point it's not that different. But I understand that the names vary so much in the countries.
Yep, interesting. So, do you have anything else to show us from your photo collection? Anything interesting?
Yes. For instance, the fact that some of them have, I don't know the name in English, but this tiny little flap, which is not a flap, this protective thing, and
Yeah,
this has
I don't remember the name either. I had a discussion about there is this sort of Bibles which also have this flaps or
yes,
protection for the edges, and I absolutely forgot how they are called.
exactly. So the goal is to prevent when you tie the laces to prevent damage on the text block.
Do you think it's a travel book? Why would you go to the length of making that?
Excuse me, can you repeat?
I mean,
So
why would you protect the edges that way? Is that a book that you'd take while traveling?
No. Because when you do the tie, if you press too much, you damage the folios.
But
I think.
I don't think it adds a lot of work to do this to add these flaps. So you just have a bit larger pieces of vellum, and that's it. So it's not much material lost and not much additional work, but it gives a lot of protection to the book block. So yeah, why not?
And often you also see, besides from just an alum toe leather, tiny little pearl made of ebony or bone. And so there's a core made of alum toe leather, and then this pearl made of bone, which is laced with a cord, a simple cord. But from this, I see not many, because they always get lost. Because it's protruding, it's so small, so most of the times they get lost. Well, like the others, no?
So
but I like them.
We have a comment on YouTube from Catherine Gumard. Yap bindings for these Bibles with flaps protecting the sides of the book block. So it's Yap binding. Yeah, that's
Yap. Yeah. I forgot about it. Yes.
Thanks a lot, Catherine. That's exactly what we were looking for.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I have this other example which is much more a late example, and it's a book I showed already to Stepan in another post. I'm always showing the same books. But this one is very interesting, and before conservation you see much better the board, and that's the parchment. But this is from 18th century, and the end bands were sewn on the joint, and I was very happy to restore it, because you see, this is the end band. It's sewn on several layers of parchment, and this parchment goes along that's the reproduction. So
it's several thin pieces of parchment.
Exactly. Several pieces of
together.
Parchment.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
And only one of them, or one or two, are sewn on the board in the joint. I had never seen.
So in this case, end bands serve a structural function too, not just
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because that's what in this much more simple example here, the only attachment of the binding to the text block are the end bands, nothing else, only the end bands. And if the book is bigger, they also put the thongs. But it was really common to use only the end bands. But in this other one, the end bands do quite a lot. but there is a big lining.
Mm-hmm.
So this was stuck onto the board as well, because this book was big and heavy, no?
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see that in the beginning, everything relies more on very simple and light structures, and then they become heavier, sturdier. They use adhesive much more, whereas in the beginning it's just sewn, no paste at all, much more flexible. So yeah, it's very enjoyable to see the evolution of these bindings in time when you restore, no? And I think Pavel was asking me before we got live whether I am curious about the books, what they speak about, and no, I'm so fascinating. Oh, the end goes through the core here and there. So for me, that's the fun part.
You know, you remind me of archaeologists.
Yeah, exactly.
You are a book archaeologist. You are not really interested in what people did, but you are interested in how they did it.
Yeah.
And by just looking at the books, you have your own. You work out a typology. You basically know what came first. Then they added this. Then they added this. And look, they're still using this particular strange thing. Why would they do it? I love this.
See. It's a really nice profession.
So once again, I'd like to address our viewers. We will be talking for some more time here, and Pavel has something to share. And maybe in the end, if we usually have our 90-minute format, if we end talking about limb bindings before that, I don't think it will happen. But anyway, I also had some bookish objects to show you, recent additions to my collection and some fun stuff. We'll see how it goes. But anyway, if you want to share our live stream on your Facebook or anywhere else, would be happy if anyone else joins us because of that. So thank you for sharing, thank you for liking, and thank you for being with us. I also wanted to return to the topic of the Islamic influence, because if you go up in your photo archive, some of the first books you showed us with these larger flaps, they definitely remind us of some Islamic bindings, because you quite often you can see these sort of flaps on Islamic bindings. So is there any relevance, any references between these two worlds?
And also the type of sewing, this characteristic rhombus shaped, it's often used in North Africa, in Sicily. So there could be some
especially
influence.
Spain, North Africa, Italy, Sicily. So there definitely should be some connections there.
Yeah, well, I really don't know, but I think it comes from the Islamic tradition a lot, no? To have this crossed, but yeah, I cannot. Yeah, be affirmative.
Maybe we need to invite Kathy Abbott next time, or somebody else who is
historian.
more versed in Islamic bindings. That's definitely a topic we need to discuss.
It could be going even further back. If you look at the very earliest bindings we have, like the Coptic bindings, not in the sense we use the word now, but the original Coptic bindings of the 6th, 7th century, they are often like that. Maybe it's just the most natural way to cover a book. I don't know.
Well, once again, it's where simplicity meets the function. So you have some sheets of written material. You need to protect them. You have leather or vellum for protection, and you join this together. Maybe add several stitches. You don't want to spend a lot of time working on that, and here you are. You have a book.
Yeah, and
Yeah, sorry.
No, I just forgot to mention that these books were not stored vertically, but flat.
Yeah.
And that's also very different, because otherwise the edges would be damaged. No, sometimes the edges are very big, and we can see that. The shame is that I cannot find the photograph of the whole book, but you have to imagine this tiny piece of parchment in the lower edge of a book.
Oh, okay. So it was a label that was outside.
Exactly. So this label was sewn. This is the tail, no, the edge of the book, and this was sewn so that if you cannot read the spine because the book is flat, no, and it's from the other side, they put these labels to see what was this about, and that was the way to read the title instead of having it in the spine. So this is I don't know, something from a notarial information.
And it's in English.
No, it's in Latin. I would say manuale,
Okay.
January. Yeah, I would say it's February.
Okay.
Jaume Vallsolà. This is the name of the notary.
Okay.
I guess.
I was surprised that it was in English because, well, and of course,
No,
the months in Latin.
I think it's Latin, but or maybe it's Catalan, Latin Catalan. I don't know.
And I assume you still can't them store vertically, so people probably store them in boxes.
It's better not to store them vertically because they cannot stand for their own, and they get damaged. The edges. I mean, no. It's better to store them flat.
So what's the modern approach to storing them? Do you use boxes, files, or just stack them together? How do you go about storing them?
Well, it depends on the archive, but if you have, it depends on the resources. If you have one or you have a whole archive, usually they have them in boxes, and they are rarely flat. I must say, but.
So you won't be out of work anytime soon.
No, I'm not worried about that.
That's good.
Don't tell anyone that we have to store them flat.
But more reasons to talk about some old and beautiful books in the future, and to invite you more times to our podcast and to our live streams. I definitely hope it will happen. So, Pavel, would you like to start your part of the talk and show us what you found? And
Yep, I'll be sharing my screen now.
Okay.
While searching for the information on this painting that we talked about, Judge Giza portrait, I found a very recent.
Do you have a close-up of this letter he has in his hands?
Well, I can go as close as you want. Just a second. Yep.
Right. Yeah. So I think it's letter locking there. So he's definitely doing something to. There is some structure on the surface of the letter or something.
And there's also lots of letters behind him. Yeah. So letters is what he does, I'd say, judging from this portrait.
We have a full tutorial on letter locking on our website on iBookBinding.com. So if you're interested, go there and find it. Just search letter locking, and you'll definitely find it. So
while looking for information on this portrait, I found a very promising looking paper delivered to the Renaissance Society of America only a year ago. It's called Book Portraits in the work of Hans Holbein. It was presented by John McQuillan, who has a wonderful Instagram, wonderfully named Instagram too, Bookish John, our kind of person. Yeah, and he also calls himself an incunabulist. He's a curator of painting, printed books and bindings at the Morgan Library. So I contacted him, and he sent me the paper and some illustrations, for which I'm very grateful. He researched the images, the portraits of the books by Hans Holbein for a recent...
Can you send me the links so I will be able to share them on...
That would be a bit difficult.
Okay.
So
we'll post them later.
Yeah, so he researched those book portraits for a very recent exhibition, a first monographic exhibition of Hans Holbein in America in 40 years. It was first at the Getty Museum, then it was at the Morgan Museum and Library, and I highly recommend that you go to the website of the exhibition because there's a 3D tour where you can see all those images. It's a very impressive exhibition. So this paper covers different messages that books could, that images of books could send to contemporary viewers, and they're really book portraits. They're not generic books. They have some details that you can see that Holbein really thought about what they showed about the book itself, about the sitter, and we can start from just before Holbein's time, when he was still a teenager, but his patron, who's shown here on the left, that's Erasmus. And this is early 16th century. Books have been around for just 50 years, and humanists and scholars only just started to really use them to disseminate their ideas. So Reformation was just around the corner from that moment on, and book was very important for them, and they and through their portraits they sent all sorts of messages. Say this double portrait of Erasmus and Peter Gillis, another humanist from the Netherlands. If we make some look closely at those books, some of them are clearly just generic books. They're there just to show that these two fine gentlemen are scholars, and to show what they are scholars of. There is a New Testament, there's a Saint Jerome, there's a Seneca, but also there is this book, and from some comments made about this painting at the time, we know what it is. It's a book they have just published together, not their own book, but a book of Thomas More, a great friend and teacher of Henry VIII, also executed by Henry VIII, as great friends, as his great friends tended to be, yeah. And this is a copy of Utopia, in fact. So, and notice how he puts the book to the front, towards the viewer. And obviously it's not meant for us, it's meant for the original viewer. And it was specifically for the patron of the book. And it's, and again, we can see that it's a book made in the Netherlands in 16th century, perhaps in England, but almost certainly in the Netherlands, and it's a part of the message of this double portrait.
Pavel,
yeah.
And what do you think is the white jar next to the book?
Oh, I'm pretty certain I know what it is. When you wrote letters
Pavel, we're losing connection.
You had to cover them with. Oops, am I still with you?
Yeah,
So
now it's fine. Yeah.
yeah, so he's holding a letter, and a part of writing a letter at the time was covering it with fine sand. So that you didn't smudge your hands. So this is not a container for salt, but probably, although, but a very fancy writing utensil. Yeah.
Pavel, if you can check the link I just sent you. Yesterday we were discussing something else with Rita, a post of hers on Instagram from earlier times, and there also is some vessel there.
Yes.
And we were discussing if it had the same purpose to hold the powder or sand for covering the ink you just wrote. So it definitely looks differently, but
This is a very peculiar thing. But you're probably right, because it's some kind of container and it's closed on the so it has some kind of cap. So yeah.
And that's the thread next to it. But yeah, the container is peculiar.
Yeah, I think I know what those rings are. Sometimes in the cabinets of curiosities you find objects carved out of a single piece of ivory, but carved in such a way that they get connected. And but it does look like a baby's toy, not even a child's toy, but a baby's toy.
I'll share the link to Rita's post as well, so that you can see the book and the description. And it's a painting by Martin van Heemskerk. Yeah, okay.
From about the same time and the same place. Yeah, it's clearly Northern European. So even before meeting Holbein, Erasmus was using books in portraits to send messages, but once he promoted his young protege, he started using them in much more overt ways. This is one of the great portraits by Hans Holbein, and sorry, I can't see you. Now I can see you. And as you can see, it has some straightforward messages about it, like the writing on top of it. And it says Herculean labors. He's been writing this book for something like 10 years. We know what it is. It's adagios. It's a collection of Latin and Greek sayings that he was collecting from ancient and medieval sources, and it was every schoolboy's favorite book for a century or so, because it had lots of dirty jokes in it, and not just dirty jokes, but every now and then there was something intended for a 15-year-old. And we know a certain William Shakespeare was very much impressed by this book, because almost all quotations that we get, all Greek and Latin quotations that we get in Shakespeare come from this book. Shakespeare famously was educated well enough to pass as an educated person, but he had very little Latin and even less Greek. One example, I just had to mention it. The longest word in Shakespeare is honorificabilitudina titibus, which is a constructed word. It's a medieval Latin joke that passed from a generation of schoolboy to generation, and it reached Shakespeare and ended up in Love's Labour Lost. I wrote a very long article about it on Wikipedia, so please go and read it. Somebody, please. So anyway, this is one part, a straightforward part, just writing on the book about writing a message on the book.
I'll share the link to this article in a moment if
Yeah,
somebody wants to try.
but it's also not a generic binding. We by comparing it with contemporary bindings, we can be pretty certain about where and when it was made. It's contemporary with the book, obviously, and it was bound where it was printed, probably in Antwerp, certainly in the Netherlands. So why would he show this particular binding? Because this book bound pretty much like this was probably sent to its patron. The book itself is dedicated to the Archbishop of Canterbury, who I show to you in a moment. And Erasmus thanked him on the very first page of his book, bound it and other works in this style, sent them to England, and also sent his own portrait with the book. And again, it's presented towards the viewer, and the viewer is clearly not us 500 years earlier, but the man who paid for writing and publishing this book. So it's a thank you. Thank you, my lord, says this binding, which I personally love. I have a painting of. Yes, here it is. Here he is, one of the very few big statesmen of Henry VIII rule who died his own death.
So he wasn't a friend.
No, he was a friend, but he was very old. And here we also have a book, and it says and it sends a very different message, and it sends the same message that the objects in the background send, because this is a processional cross and a mitre of Archbishop of Canterbury, chief English cleric, but he's not wearing them. It's not a portrait of him as an archbishop, it's a portrait of him as a man. And the book lying in front of him, its contents, well, I'm not enough of a specialist to say that it's obvious to me what it is, but specialists have looked at it, and it's a book of hours. And it's not a liturgical book. It's not meant to be used as part of a church ceremony. It's a book of personal devotion. So again, this is him as a private man. He's put aside his robes and he's praying on his own.
And these type of books were like luxury objects, no?
Yeah.
Not everyone had books of hours.
I'm not sure about this one, because it looks like a printed book to me. So
okay.
So again, they weren't cheap, obviously, but he's not flashing his personal wealth. Okay, he's wearing Russian furs, so he's not just anybody, but he's a private person. He has a modest small book that you can hold in your hand. You don't need three people holding it next to you. So that I find this a really interesting comment. And now another example.
I should also add that during one of our previous live streams, I think it was the last live stream when we were in part of the last stream, we were talking about the industry museum in Ghent in Belgium and the printing part of this museum. We also talked about some interesting books, and also books represented in paintings. And Pavel made another a talk about it. So if you're interested, you should go there on our YouTube channel or on our Facebook, and there is the previous live stream that happened a month ago or something like that. So that's also quite interesting.
A couple more examples are examples of women holding books, but they are very different women of similar status, but of different inclinations. This is a wife of a very, very powerful man. As you can see from the gold chains, from columns, from everything, you can see that this is a powerful, rich woman. And it is interesting that we have an original drawing for this painting, and there, she's smiling, so she wasn't okay with that. No, you won't be painting me smiling. You'll paint. In the second image, you can see that she's a much more important person. Here, she could be a wife. There, she's a mistress, I think, a lady. Yeah. And another thing, that she clearly wasn't holding a book at the time. So the book, she asked to add a book. And if we look at what he added, here it is, I think. Here's a better example. He adds a closed book, so we don't know what she's reading. So it's more of a general sort of attribute, probably even not an attribute of literacy or literal aspirations, but more like an attribute of piety. You often see saints with books, Mary holding books. So probably more along those lines, but it's not generic books. This article that I read by John McQuillan notes a curious detail: the side of the book that the clasp attaches to. So it attaches to the front of the book. So it's based on the top and clasps on the bottom, which is apparently the reverse of what southern bookbinders were doing. So it's an attribute of a northern book, like English book or Netherlandish book, and it's certainly not German.
That's so interesting. I never thought of that.
I never even noticed that. Yeah, but he says that he checked the books that Holbein would have seen back in Germany, and there are no examples like that. So this is a detail that betrays his familiarity with English books, and that he doesn't want just to put any book in the hands of a lady. He wants to put a book that she would recognize as a local product. So she's a proud English lady with an English book in her hand. And now I'll show you a very different sort of lady. First of all, here's Thomas More, and this is a sketch for an enormous portrait, a family portrait that unfortunately does not survive. This was the very first job that Erasmus got for Holbein in England. He lived for 2 years in this house, and he painted this family many times. Here's Thomas More himself, here's his father, and here, by the way, here is his jester. So he had a literal fool living in his house, and also somewhere around here must be here she is. Here's a monkey. He also had a pet monkey. And notice how almost all women in this portrait have books. Perhaps even all women. Yeah, one of them is holding a book behind below her hand. Another one is reading or pointing towards something in a book. to her father. Here are two more ladies holding books. And this particular lady, who I'm most interested in this portrait, is Margaret Roper. This Roper is her husband's surname. She is a daughter of Thomas More. And notice how the clasps on the book are again attached to the front, just like we saw before. Again, here they are. And there is another miniature portrait of her later in life, also with the book, and a rather functional-looking book, I'd say, not a working book, but a book she clearly reads and perhaps even has written herself, because she was a published translator and author in her own right. So here a book, again, a very realistic looking book, probably referencing a contemporary book, is saying something about her as a writer. I also wanted to notice the sad eyes in this portrait. Just a few years before it was painted, her father was executed by Henry VIII. His head was separated from his body and was displayed next to the Tower of London for a few months. Then one night she was allowed to travel by boat to the Tower of London and to take the head of her father and bury it. So the sadness you see is not just her age, it's because she's just 30. She looks older, and I think her life shows in her eyes. So there is, I have just a few more examples. So we should probably talk a bit about who this man is. He's a German merchant who lived and worked in London in the so-called Steel Yard, which was and still is a very small part of the city of London. In the very center, there's a steel yard pathway, and there's a Hanseatic alley, I think. So he's a part of a Hanseatic League, and there were lots of these young, dashing, well-educated German traders in London, and Holbein first started in that very house where this man worked and lived, and he painted many of them. And just look at this, how this man represents himself. He's clearly a merchant, and here is his colleague. Now he could be a minister, he could be a clergyman, he could be a young lover. I don't know. This is very abstract.
He's just well-off.
Yeah. Again, Russian furs. All the fur you see in German and English portraits of the time are from Russia. And imagine traveling from Russia to England, how much it cost. It cost a lot. And here is the book that he chose to be depicted with. There is again a letter inserted into it, but it's not a working letter. It's not something you owe me X grams of gold. I don't know. It says veritas odium parit. Truth produces hatred, and it's about. I know, but
true.
it's actually a part of a longer saying that in full it goes, flattery produces friends, truth produces hatred.
Ah.
So it's one idea is why would you depict yourself idea? But Holbein's, and he basically saying that other painters are flattering their suitors. I'm showing it as it is. Yes, he is indeed this handsome and rich.
And is it known? Is it understandable what's written on the front page of the book? Because there's definitely some text.
Yeah, it's gilded.
Yeah, we know. Yes, the hair and wid, W-I-D, and those are just abbreviations of his name because this helps to identify him because we have the archive of the Steelyard, and he was Herman von Wedig III. So Herman, Her, and Wedig, yeah. But it's quite a book. I mean, it is an impressive book, and it's not a ledger.
Is it gilded edges or something, or at least painted? And
it looks gilded.
Yeah.
Yeah, and embossed.
Yeah.
Not painted.
And some decoration on the top edge as well, and
the clasps are pretty impressive too. Yeah. So just a second, let me get back to this. Yeah. So a final example and an even finer example of a book is a portrait of Thomas Cromwell. He was not a nice guy.
Also an interesting figure.
Yeah. Also killed by his best friend Henry VIII. From what I understand, nobody was sorry, except for Henry VIII a few years later, when the next minister was worse than this one. So he basically executed the next prime minister for accusing this prime minister. And here we can see a very different book, a book different to everything we've seen before today. This is neither English nor Netherlandish. This is not a scholar's book. This is not a working book. This is a presentation copy. It's covered in black velvet, perhaps. It's certainly gilded. It has clasps with gems inserted into them, and we can be pretty sure that it's a French work of, again, earlier 16th century. And the theory is that it was a gift to Cromwell from his biggest patron, Anne Boleyn, who was raised in the French royal court and was very much purveyor of French fashions for everything. And they were both, they weren't friends, okay? They were great allies in moving.
A gift or a bribe?
I don't think.
Yeah.
At that level of society, how can you tell?
Some mutual understanding.
Yeah. So here you go, from a merchant's working book to a queen's bribe to the prime minister. Anything to anybody taste. You just. So it pays to, I always knew it pays to look at the books in portraits, but especially in portraits by Holbein, where nothing is accidental and everything is true to what it was. It pays to know what you're looking at.
And where is the best collection of Holbein currently? Do you know? Do you have any?
Sure, the Royal Collection. You can see. First of all, you can see most of his portrait drawings. They're almost permanently on show in the Windsor Castle. And there are also many portraits, about 6 or 7. Then there are quite a few in the National Gallery, including the famous ambassadors. And apart from their early portraits are mostly in Germany still. Later portraits are either in the UK or in America. This particular one, as well as Thomas More's portrait, are in the Frick collection, and you can only see them there because the foundational charter, the will that founded the museum, says that you can't move anything, you can't change anything from what it was when it was founded, including the famous example, 4 or 5 paintings were stolen 30 years ago from the Frick collection, including one Vermeer, and they still have the frames hanging where they were because you are not allowed to change anything.
Okay.
So yeah, that's a great path and great evolution and a great story we had, starting from the simplest and most functional bindings and ending with this.
Yes, and
More
and the
gold.
paintings.
Yeah.
Yeah, the selection of paintings is beautiful. I enjoyed a lot all these details of the owners. Yeah, very interesting. Thank you,
Yeah,
Pavel.
many thanks to John McQuillan who shared his work with us, and I shared the links to his Instagram and to some additional links, and there is a link to book he contributed to about Holbein, by the way, and so if you're interested, just check the links, and there is more information about John, about Holbein, about paintings and objects depicted in them. So you can find something more.
Can I stop sharing the screen now?
Yeah.
So...
I might need to leave because I was not aware it was a live thing, so I thought I could leave. But yeah, now I need to leave.
I think we'll just finish now.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
good.
I think
It's
we
been 80
talked
minutes,
about
yeah.
everything we wanted to talk about, and I reserve bookish stuff and some beautiful and interesting things I bought recently for the next live stream, and we definitely are going to stay on schedule now. I hope we definitely are going to stay, and we'll return to our bi-weekly live streams. So stay tuned, subscribe to our YouTube channel, to our Facebook page, and please share the all this stuff. Check the link to Patreon and maybe support us. Pledges start with only $1 or €1 per month, so I hope that's not much. But you can definitely pledge more, and we'll be very happy. And later this week, I'll definitely post at least one episode of our podcast. So there will be something. I think something dedicated to Ukrainian book history, and there were some topics we discussed earlier and some interesting stuff. So I hope you will see it as well. Thank you, Rita, for joining us today. We will definitely continue this practice of inviting people to our live streams. It was definitely interesting and fun. Thank you very much.
You are a joy. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll stop the stream, and we will stay for 30